Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
It started subtly, like a draft through a closed window, barely noticeable at first, but undeniable once you feel it. I used to joke that my wife, Eliza, could read me better than anyone. Lately, it felt like she'd stopped trying. The small things gave her away. The slight flinch when I touched her back in passing. The way her phone never left her hand, even when she went to the bathroom. How her laughter suddenly sounded rehearsed, too measured, like she was trying to prove something, though to whom, I wasn't sure. One night, while we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I asked about her day. She answered in vague phrases, "It was fine. Same as always." She stirred her soup, barely eating. I tried to lighten the mood, told her I was thinking of booking that mountain cabin we used to love. She blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. Then she said, "That's nice, Michael," and went back to scrolling through her phone. My name isn't Michael. I stared at her, but she didn't look up. Didn't even notice the slip. I didn't correct her. I just sat back in my chair and listened to the whisper of instinct, the one I'd silenced for months. Something was going on, and she was trying to pretend it wasn't. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I took a careful look through the glove compartment of her car. She'd left the keys on the kitchen island. There was nothing obvious, no receipts, no notes, but that didn't surprise me. Eliza wasn't careless. I had a small dash cam from an old work vehicle, the kind that recorded both audio and video and synced to a private cloud account the moment the car started. It took me 5 minutes to install it, hidden beneath the dashboard. When she came down dressed and distracted, I offered to warm up her car since it was frosty. She handed me the keys without hesitation. For the next few days, I acted normal. We talked about groceries and weekend errands. She told me she had a late client meeting Thursday, and I nodded. Said I'd make myself a frozen pizza. She smiled vaguely and kissed my cheek, but it landed nowhere. There was no warmth behind it. That night, I waited until I was sure she was asleep, then logged into the Dashcam app. I scrolled through the files, each one timestamped, each with a preview image. I clicked on the one from the Thursday meeting. The audio kicked in immediately, windshield wipers swiping softly, a pop station playing quietly in the background. Then I heard her voice. Clear. Happy. A voice I hadn't heard in a long time. "Did you miss me today?" she said. A man's voice answered, low and amused. "Every minute. But you already knew that." She laughed freely. The kind of laugh she used to save for me. They talked about a bar they liked. About some conference no one was attending. About Michael wanting to meet up again soon, but how it was too risky. My stomach turned as I realized he wasn't just some fling, he was someone woven into her routine. They parked somewhere. I couldn't see anything outside the windows, but I could hear the kissing, the shift of fabric, the sounds that didn't belong to a casual ride. I clicked the next file. Same pattern. The flirtation, the anticipation, the not-so-subtle plans to use the back seat of the car for something other than driving. I closed the laptop slowly. My hands weren't shaking. I just sat there in the dark, breathing through the confirmation of what I had known but refused to admit. She was gone. Every day, every trip she made, every conversation she thought was private, I cataloged it. I started recognizing patterns. Days she was distracted, days she was glowing, the exact time she'd shift from distant to performatively sweet. The recordings never lied. With me, she now had to manufacture it. I waited for the moment when she'd slip up in a way that mattered, not just to me, but to others. And then it came. She received an invitation to a dinner party from friends we both knew, Matt and Jenna, a couple we'd spent years vacationing with. Eliza was oddly insistent that we attend. "We've been so isolated," she said. "It'll be good for us." Good for us. A strange phrase to use, considering she was sleeping with another man. I said yes. I even bought a new shirt. What she didn't know is that I wasn't coming to that dinner to play the fool. By the time Saturday rolled around, I had everything I needed. I had organized the dash cam recordings, clipped the key moments, backed them up on multiple drives. And most importantly, I had reviewed them enough to understand what kind of man her lover was: smug, careless. The kind who thought he'd already won. I watched her dress that evening, carefully choosing her earrings, smoothing her hair. She looked beautiful, but beauty without truth was hollow. As we walked to the car, she slipped her hand into mine. It was the first time she'd done that in months. I squeezed it gently, and she glanced at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She thought I didn't know. The dinner party was held at Matt and Jenna's place, a sprawling mid-century home tucked just beyond the edge of town, with wide glass walls and a deck that overlooked the hillside. It was the kind of place Eliza always said she wanted us to live in someday, though her tone had long since shifted from hopeful to resentful. Now it just sounded like a threat, like something I'd failed to provide. On the way over, she scrolled through her phone, occasionally smirking, tapping out replies to someone she didn't name. She didn't try to hide it anymore. She assumed I was too oblivious to put the pieces together or too weak to say anything if I had. The moment we arrived, she detached from me like I was excess baggage. She floated into the room, all smiles and familiar greetings, immediately drawn toward a group of friends gathered by the bar. I trailed behind, slow and deliberate, shaking hands and accepting a drink I had no intention of finishing. It didn't take long to spot him. He was across the room, laughing too loud at something Jenna said, one hand resting casually on the back of the couch where Eliza would later sit. His name was Ryan, mid-30s. The kind of man who styled himself like a confident bachelor but always seemed to orbit the lives of married women. I knew him by voice, by the exact intonation he used when he told Eliza she looked dangerous in red. I knew him better than he knew himself. She greeted him with a touch on the wrist. Just a barely there touch that said everything she thought she was clever enough to conceal. He smiled at her like they shared a secret language. The night moved on like a well-rehearsed play. Small talk, laughter, people rotating through conversations. But I wasn't listening to any of it. I was watching her, how she laughed louder at his jokes. Occasionally she would glance my way, flash a quick smile, the kind that said, "See? I'm being good." But it was hollow. She was already somewhere else. Someone else's. Jenna called everyone to the dining room, her voice cheerful and tipsy, announcing that dinner was ready. We gathered around the long wooden table, couples clustering together. Eliza sat beside Ryan. Of course she did. She made a show of saving me a seat across from them. "So we can all talk," she said sweetly. I nodded, took the chair without a word. The conversation started light. Favorite vacation spots, bad hotel stories, some teasing between Matt and Jenna about his terrible sense of direction. Matt turned to Ryan and asked, "So, anyone special in your life? Or are you still living the dream?" Ryan grinned, eyes glancing toward Eliza for a second too long. "I've learned to appreciate what isn't mine," he said smoothly. The table chuckled, confused by the double entendre. Eliza looked down, pretending to fiddle with her napkin. Ryan raised his glass in mock solemnity, then looked directly at me. "She prefers me," he said, voice low but unmistakable. The words cut through the noise like glass on tile. A few heads turned. Someone stifled a cough. I didn't blink. I just looked at him, let the silence hang in the air like smoke, then said, "Enjoy her." That was it. No raised voice. Just those two words, quiet, final. Eliza's head snapped up. For the first time all evening, she looked straight at me, not with indifference or annoyance, but fear. Her eyes widened. Around the table, the air shifted. People glanced at each other, brows furrowed, unsure if what they just heard was part of some private joke or the opening line of something darker. Jenna's hand froze over her wine glass. Matt leaned slightly forward, confused but alert. Eliza's voice cracked as she tried to laugh. That's not funny," she said, too loudly. "You're not funny." But no one was laughing. I stood up slowly, took a step toward the sideboard where Jenna kept the media console. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a flash drive, simple, anonymous, and plugged it into the USB port. "What are you doing?" Eliza asked, her voice too high, too quick. I didn't answer her. Jenna's TV flickered to life. "Is this a movie?" Matt asked, trying to diffuse the tension. "In a way," I said. The first clip loaded. A darkened car interior. The dash cam view wasn't cinematic. It was real, sharp with truth. Ryan's voice came through clearly. "You always drive me crazy when you wear that red blouse." A few seconds later, Eliza's voice. "That's why I wore it." The room fell silent. No one moved. Eliza reached for the remote, but Jenna got to it first, her face a mask of disbelief. The screen kept playing. More clips. Same voices. Same affair. And then came the moment I had waited for, a sharp intake of breath, loud and unmistakable, from a woman at the far end of the table. Ryan's wife. No one even realized she had arrived until that moment. She had walked in with Jenna's sister just minutes before dinner was served and sat at the far end without drawing attention. "That's my husband," she said, her voice cold and shaking. Eliza froze. Ryan turned, eyes wide. Without another word, the woman stood, walked around the table, and slapped Eliza so hard the sound echoed off the walls. Eliza staggered back in her chair, stunned. Nobody said a word. The woman turned and walked straight out the front door. Ryan hesitated, torn between following her or hiding under the table, then bolted after her like a man who just remembered he had something to lose. I turned off the TV, set the remote down gently, and looked at my wife. Her face was pale. She didn't speak, because there was nothing left to say. The slap still hung in the air. Not just its echo, but its consequence, like a dropped match igniting dry leaves. Eliza remained frozen in her chair, one hand to her cheek, her eyes unfocused, the other clenched into a fist on the edge of the tablecloth as if gripping it might keep her tethered to reality. But reality was no longer her ally. No one moved. Even the usual clink of cutlery or the low background music seemed to have vanished. Time itself paused, like the whole room collectively held its breath, trying to process what had just happened. Jenna broke the silence first, not with words but with motion. She stepped back from the table slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "Eliza, is this real?" she asked, her voice hushed, as if speaking too loudly might invite more chaos. Eliza didn't respond. She looked around the room like a child waking from a nightmare and not recognizing her surroundings. The weight of every gaze, disbelief, disgust, pressed down on her, heavy and unrelenting. Ryan was gone, having chased after his wife like a man fleeing a burning building. But Eliza remained rooted. She'd always been the one in control, the one who crafted her image carefully, never letting the cracks show. But there were no masks left to hold. The cracks were now chasms. A friend of hers, Melanie, someone I knew she confided in regularly, stood slowly, stepping away from the table without a word. She gave Eliza one last look, then turned and walked into the kitchen, glass still in hand. I stayed seated, unmoved. I didn't speak because I didn't need to. Everything I could have said, about betrayal, about what it feels like to be reduced to a shadow in your own marriage, had already been laid bare on the television screen. Another guest spoke up, Craig, a mutual friend who'd introduced us years ago. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, more to himself than anyone. "Jesus, Eliza." Her lips parted, as if she might respond, but nothing came out. Her throat moved, swallowing something heavy. 1,000 excuses must have lined up in her head, but none of them sounded plausible anymore. And then came the sound none of us expected: footsteps. From the hallway emerged two more figures. Her parents. Eliza hadn't noticed them arrive, but I had. I knew they'd been invited. I knew Jenna had extended the offer weeks ago and Eliza never bothered to follow up. And now, here they were. They had witnessed enough from the living room where they arrived late, just as the footage had begun to roll. Her mother stood with arms crossed, lips pressed tightly together. Her father, a stern man rarely given to outbursts, looked at his daughter with a silence that said more than any shouting ever could. He stepped forward, slowly. "I warned you," he said, voice low and sharp. Eliza blinked, stunned. "Dada." He held up a hand, silencing her. "I told you. Years ago. I told you if you ever let arrogance outweigh character, you'd lose everything worth keeping. And now look." She stood up suddenly, like her legs had regained purpose, like she could fix something with motion. It wasn't supposed to. Her mother stepped forward this time. "You embarrassed us," she said coldly. "You humiliated him, your husband, in front of everyone. But more than that, you destroyed yourself." Eliza's voice cracked. "Please, don't do this here." Her mother's expression didn't change. "Here is exactly where this needed to happen." They turned and walked out without waiting for a reply. Just like that, she lost the last people who might have stood beside her. She looked at me then. It was the first time all night she really looked at me, not like I was a man she once married, or the background character in her carefully curated life, but like I was something entirely unfamiliar. I didn't speak to her. I turned to Jenna and said, "Thank you for dinner. Apologies for the disruption." Jenna nodded slowly. "No apologies needed." As I reached the front door, I paused, pulled a thin envelope from my coat, and placed it gently on the table near her empty wine glass. She didn't move. "These are the divorce papers," I said simply. "They've already been filed. You'll find the details inside: division of assets, formal notice of intent, timelines. You don't need to call me." "Please," she tried again. But it was too late. The damage wasn't new, it had just finally been made visible. For her, the shock was fresh. For me, the grieving had already happened long ago. Now, it was just execution. As I stepped into the cold evening, I saw Ryan standing at the edge of the driveway, arguing quietly with his wife. She was having none of it. She shoved his hands away, got in the car, and drove off without waiting for him to finish his sentence. He turned and saw me. He looked wrecked, panicked, lost. But I didn't stop. I walked past him like he was a stranger asking for change, not the man who helped dismantle my marriage. Inside, the party was unraveling. Guests whispering, chairs scraping, the tension lifting only to be replaced with stunned disbelief. Eliza remained inside, center stage of a catastrophe she orchestrated and never saw coming. She once told me she liked parties because they made her feel unreal, like she could be anyone for a night. There was only this one, broken, exposed. And she earned every moment of it. The morning after the party, my phone didn't stop buzzing. I ignored it. Dozens of texts and missed calls lit up the screen. Jenna, Craig, Melanie, even my accountant. But I wasn't interested in responding to anyone. I already knew what they wanted. Answers, reactions, maybe even apologies for how the night ended. But I had none to offer. I wasn't sorry. I had simply closed a chapter. What surprised me most was the silence from Eliza. After everything, after the humiliation, the undeniable evidence, she didn't reach out. Not right away. I figured she was still trying to process the reality she could no longer control, probably hoping there was still some version of events she could spin in her favor. But there was none. That door had shut, and behind it, she had locked herself in with a version of herself no one wanted to know anymore. By noon, Jenna finally got through. I answered only because I owed her that much. I don't even know what to say, she said. You don't have to say anything. She exhaled. You looked so calm last night. Like you were waiting for it. I was. There was a pause, then a quiet admission. She's been coming here every weekend. For brunch. For yoga. Laughing like everything was perfect. She's good at perfect, I said. Perfect lies. Perfect betrayal. She's had years to practice. Jenna hesitated. Her parents called me this morning. They said they're done. Completely. Her father told me he doesn't want to see her until she finds a mirror and actually uses it. That didn't surprise me. What came later that afternoon was unexpected. I was packing a few remaining items from the guest house, where I had been staying during our final weeks together, when I heard a knock. I opened the door slowly, and there she was. Eliza. She didn't speak at first. She just stood there, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. She blinked back tears. I don't even know where to begin. Then maybe you shouldn't, I said flatly. Her bottom lip quivered. Please. Just 5 minutes. I considered it. Then I stepped aside, because I needed to see what she thought she could salvage from the wreckage. She walked in like a stranger in a museum of her own ruin. Her eyes scanned the half-empty shelves, the faint indentation on the couch cushion where I'd spent the last 2 months sleeping alone. I never wanted it to get this far, she said quietly, standing near the table but not sitting. It just happened. No, I said, it didn't. That's the lie people tell themselves when they want to feel less responsible. Her voice wavered. I didn't mean to fall for him. You didn't just fall. You dove. She winced like the words had hit her physically. He meant nothing, she said quickly. Not really. I was lost. Then maybe you should have looked for me, I replied. I was standing right next to you the entire time. She finally sat, her shoulders slumped. I was angry. At you. At everything. You stopped seeing me. I never stopped seeing you, I said. I stopped chasing a version of you that didn't want to exist anymore. She looked up sharply. So that's it? You're really going through with it? I gestured toward the papers. You already signed the ones I sent before. You just didn't know what they meant yet. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. Everyone's turned on me, she whispered. Even my parents. My own mother won't take my calls. They saw you, I said simply. Maybe for the first time. I made a mistake. You made a decision, I corrected her. Silence filled the room. She sat there like a broken version of the woman I used to know, smaller somehow, quieter, like the weight of consequence had finally become real. Then she said something I didn't expect. Can I come back? I stared at her. You're asking that after everything? She nodded slowly, almost childlike. I don't have anywhere else. You had everywhere, I said. And you threw it away. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. She didn't move at first. Then she rose, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and walked past me. Just before stepping out, she turned. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, but I don't care enough to anymore. That hit her harder than anything else. Hate is still a connection. Indifference is the final goodbye. As she walked away, I saw her shoulders shaking, her steps uneven. And I didn't feel a thing. That night, I got a message from her father. You did the right thing. I should have seen it sooner. We're sorry you had to go through it like that. The world she built on deception had finally collapsed, And the only person who didn't expect it to fall was the one who laid every stone. 3 months passed. It's strange how quickly life recalibrates after destruction. The days moved forward without her. There were no more cold silences across the dinner table. I found peace in routines I didn't realize I'd missed. Morning walks without needing to explain where I was going. Making coffee exactly how I liked it, without accommodating anyone else's tastes. Reading in bed until midnight. Silence, once oppressive, became a luxury. There was no one walking past with a forced sigh, no one scrolling endlessly beside me, no one pretending our lives were still aligned. I moved into a modest but beautiful apartment overlooking a tree-lined street. Nothing extravagant, but everything I needed. Clean space, natural light, my own choices hanging on the walls. The old life, the shared rooms, the double sinks and matching robes, it was gone. Replaced by something quieter, smaller, but honest. I never blocked her number. She texted once. A simple message, no punctuation. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. I never responded, because answering would suggest there was still something left to discuss. And there wasn't. The only unfinished business had been resolved in that living room, in front of witnesses who could never unsee what she had hidden. Jenna reached out a few weeks after the fallout. She wanted to check in. Said people were still talking about that night, still replaying the moment the TV came on, still trying to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the one they saw unravel. I told her I didn't want to know the details. I had no interest in gossip, no desire to be the center of some whispered scandal. That part of my life was closed, and I intended to keep it sealed. Just a man enjoying his meal, and a woman living with the consequences of choices she never thought would catch up to her. That was the last time I saw her.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.